Hello and welcome everyone to the Tech Sharmit Podcast. Today I'm here with another special guest, Mr. Niall Ashley, who has joined us from England. If I talk more about Niall, then he is being an IBM champion. He is known for his expertise in mainframe security consulting, aeronautical engineering, as well as software development. Not only this, he is also a driven advocate for mental health. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about mainframes, mental health awareness, and many more things. But just before that, I'd like to thank Niall for joining us today. And now I request you to please tell us something about yourself and initiate the discussion.
Something about myself. I'm I'm quite a stereotype in terms of being a nerd. I love comic books. I love like films, mostly a sort of sci-fi. So like Star Wars, Alien, Predator. I haven't really watched Star Trek though, so maybe I need to kind of buck up on that front. Yeah, and I love Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I'm pretty stereotypical in that regard.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So could you please tell a bit more about your professional journey, like how you started with mainframes and how you are doing right now for this particular
Yeah,
field?
sure. I basically left sixth form or sort of my high school basically, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my career, but I knew that I didn't want to do exams. I didn't want to do more kind of university kind of style education with exams at the end. I decided to do an apprenticeship. I was looking in IT, but I ended up settling on engineering because I quite like working with tools and sort of practicality. So I did an apprenticeship at Airbus, and I ended up working there for a cumulative 4 years. But I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't feel like there was many opportunities to progress. And I always loved IT. Deep down, I've always loved, maybe because of my love for video games, I've always loved like working on a computer, understanding the code, the behind the scenes. And so I thought, why not go from sort of hardware, physical aerospace engineering to sort of software engineering. Um, in the end, I sort of had an opportunity to work on the mainframe. I started work at BMC Software, fantastic company. I worked with some absolutely phenomenal people, and I worked there for about 18 months, so just a year and a half. And then some of my old colleagues had left to start their own business, which was Vitali. So then I started a job there, and yeah, I sort of want to stay in this industry now for the rest of my days because I've seen how many opportunities there are and how well this industry has looked after my colleagues. So yeah, I'm happy being here, and I want to sort of make my mark.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So thank you so much, Niall, for telling us about your professional background. And now we would like to hear more about it. As you have a diverse background, including mainframe security consulting, aeronautical engineering, and software development. So how have these experiences shaped your perspective on problem solving as well as innovation?
So I personally feel like every sort of experience in life is a learning opportunity. If something doesn't go wrong, possibly there's actually more to be learned because you know how not to do something in the future versus how to do it. And they can be more specific. This bit failed me, whereas this didn't. So there's been quite a few lessons that I kind of took with me that I sort of took into myself and have carried through from both past work experiences and actual jobs and through to my current role, my current career. So, for example, when I was at school and college, I realized, just how important it is, and I realized this firsthand, obviously, in an educational position, just how important it is to ask questions and the real power of learning, the power of, being willing to absorb information and how far that can kind of take you. You can go from just being, a sort of a mediocre grade, like a middle of the line grade to a high grade, sort of a pass to a distinctive kind of distinction grade. And then, as say, I had work experience in multiple different areas. I actually did work experience with the Royal Air Force in the United Kingdom, and that sort of showed me how different structures and hierarchies work. You might have a manager, and a manager has a manager, but it's clearer in the Army or the RAF where I was, where you have, each rank has a very distinctive kind of role, and they all have their own individual kind of sliders on their brassards with different chevrons. So again, that was a really insightful experience. When I was in retail and hospitality, these part-time jobs that at the time I was just trying to kind of make ends meet and earn a bit of money. But actually, they taught me the value of good customer service skills. How to form a meaningful relationship with both colleagues, but also customers. And how valuable that is in an IT role. You will have clients, you will have customers, so
Right.
you need to form these relationships. And then most recently at Airbus, obviously before my current career, my last career in aeronautical engineering, Airbus taught me the importance of processes. So things are designed in such a way that they work, they're efficient. That's kind of engineering 101. Ideally, minimal kind of input, minimal effort, maximum output. So you want to follow a process, but actually the importance of writing good documentation, so that the expectations of your roles, what is expected of you, why, how. So as I say, I feel like every job, every experience I've had in life, I try to learn something and take that with me, and grow as a person. But yeah, I've got quite a diverse background. So I've got quite a diverse range of, lessons that I've taken with me, quite a diverse range of learnings,
Okay. Yeah, and I also noticed that you are a proficient in multiple software and programming languages. So how do you approach learning new technologies, and how has this versatility benefited your career?
I'll start off just by saying proficient is very generous. I still like to think of I'm quite modest, but I like to think of myself as I'm learning these languages, and I'm never going to be maybe proficient. I'm never going to be an expert anyway. I very much am still, as I say, on a journey. But that journey first started when I was in year 7. So for me, and anyone in the UK will know, that's just after starting secondary education. So my first year of secondary education, we began learning basically programming with this application called Scratch. And it's very visual. It's very, very good for kids at that age. And it's perfectly suited for making short games. You can make like Space Invaders or Pac-Man, or you can make Asteroid. And at that age, as someone who's already interested in video games,
Right.
there's no better way to catch my interest than saying, you can make a game using this language. I was hooked, and so I guess you could say that this application, scratched my itch. But then, you get older and you move to more, sort of maybe more professional languages. So we moved to programming with Python, and I now had this point of reference. So I've seen something as a visual, and now I see it as a string of text. And then for every variable, every string, every process, input, output, etc., I had a mental image of what things should look like, how they fit together, how they work, and that made it easier to move from a simple language to a high level. Maybe I would really struggle going back to something low level, so something like assembler. But that helped me with that transition. And the thing is, I've found that for every language, there's differences, there's quirks, and you have to take the good with the bad. So Scala is phenomenal for creating these clearly formatted reports, but it is not as versatile as something like COBOL. Equally, JCL is great for running batch jobs, but it's actually even more powerful when you know how to use it in tandem with languages like Rex. So I think it's really important to kind of be able to say this has its use, it has its use case. But actually, maybe we can use these together, or we can, say this does that and this does something else, and they're both good at what they do. We don't need something that necessarily does both at an okay level. You want something that does one thing great and something else great. But yeah, I found that it's always about so my learning of these technologies is try to kind of visualize it, try to create a flow diagram or something like that, and then use a point of reference. So for me it was Scratch. Scratch helped me learn Python, and then Python's helping me learn Scala, COBOL. Well, I don't know COBOL, but it would help me. So
Yeah, like this thing, I would say that this is the best advice for the new learners also, because if someone wants to learn any technology, and if they know like what is the process behind the scene, so they can easily visualize the thing, they can understand the things like what is happening in the actual module or the piece of code for which they are working. So this is the good thing. And have you got any chance to develop any game, because you are so
uh,
much interested in this?
So I was learning Unity, and then there was a bit of a kind of a controversy with that in terms of their pricing structure and some other decisions that were being made. So I am going to be moving to learn a tool called Godot or Godot, depending on how you pronounce it. And that's like an open source language. And to be honest, I wanted to move to something open source anyway, because I was I talk to Joe Winchester quite often with GSE, United Kingdom's GSE group, and Joe's a big advocate for open source, and it's it just made me think I want to make that decision as well. So I haven't made any games yet, although I actually did do work experience at EA back when they were in the middle of making Battlefield 1. So I had some experience in that, and it was a fantastic learning opportunity. And as I say, in my free time, I want to start making something independently, just a little passion project, but nothing to show now, unfortunately. I've not got a secret side hustle as a big video game developer.
Okay, all right. So yeah, now I would like to talk a bit about the mainframes. So as you have expertise for this, so my question is, there are some people who still believe that mainframes are only used by the financial corporations. So do you agree with this thing? Or if not, then could you please share some examples like how mainframes are utilized in other industries like aerospace, military, and healthcare domain? So what's your thought on this?
So I see this quite a lot. And I went to a conference recently in the United Kingdom, and I had a lot of people saying, okay, so you do sort of cybersecurity, or you do security. What system do you do it on? And I said I do it on a mainframe, and they go, oh, people aren't still using those. And then I explained, well, they're actually used by like 90+% of the world's biggest insurance companies and banks and retailers. And but it isn't. And this is, I think, it's an important point to kind of clarify, is that it's not just used by banks, insurance, and retailers. It's great in those roles because of the processing potential. How many transactions it can kind of calculate and work out and compute and transfer all this data, and that is fantastic. But it can do so much more, and it does do so much more. So this is kind of possibly going to sound like a bit of a shameless plug, really, but I actually wrote an article on LinkedIn a few months ago. I can't remember how many months ago now, maybe 3 months ago. So I don't know, let's say February. And I covered that as a topic, and I think the expression they used was mainframes are a conservative technology, and they're meant for financial corporations, which again they can be, but they're actually so much more valuable in other places. So there was actually a kind of an article that I'd read about how IBM mainframes were actually supporting the US nuclear arsenal. That's a phenomenal thing to learn about, and it, it's true. And there was also articles about, for example, mainframes used in healthcare, the fact that they're used by governments. So the IRS, the Internal or Inland, I think it is, Revenue Service. You've got the Homeland Security Department. They use mainframes. The UK government has the Ministry of Pensions. There's loads of use cases. Airlines, again, they'll processing data from airlines. There's loads of use cases, and I think it is frustrating sometimes when people quite like to box things in and say, oh, well, it's good at that and that's it. Well, yes, but I'm sure at first people thought that the computer, that the original computer was good at it was good as a calculator. It was a big calculator, but it could compute a lot of plus, minus, multiply, divide calculations. And then eventually we moved to, I don't know, Boots and all these retailers in the UK, like pharmacies, would have mainframes, and then video games would be running on mainframes. And then eventually we moved to, the smaller handheld devices we have now. But I think people do like to kind of dumb it down, really, and say, oh, the mainframe was good at this. But actually, there's a really interesting point, and I would say to anyone listening to this podcast, Google EDVAC, which is the Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, and that was one of the earliest electronic computers. It was like the precursor to what we know as the mainframe. And that was actually commissioned or basically proposed for use by the Ballistics Research Laboratory in America, and that basically subsequently became the US Army Research Labs. So it's all well and good saying mainframes are only good at retail and banking processing, but actually they were used by ballistics researchers. So it just goes to show you, like, there's so much potential. I think we just need to think outside the box.
Okay. Yeah. So like with your statement, it is proof that no, it is not only limited to the financial domain. There are many other domain where mainframes are still being utilized and on a very larger scale also. So yeah, like I think now it is pretty much clear to all those viewers who have this question, like, is it only specifically for financial domain or other also?
No,
So
exactly. It's not. Yeah.
yeah, okay. And there is one more common perception about mainframe, that they are very large, cumbersome, and take up a lot of space. So how do you think about this thing? Like, is it true, or nowadays
Again,
these things evolve?
historically, yes,
Mhm.
it was true. But again, it's kind of unfair, really, to sort of say, that the mainframe was big and cumbersome, therefore it still is. We've moved such a long way. I think I got the exact measurements in this or very close measurements in this article I wrote before. But the original kind of precursors to the mainframe, so the Harvard Mark I, ENIAC, and EDVAC, they were tons, thousands of kilograms. They took up entire rooms, potentially the best part of a building. You'd be talking meters cubed, or many cubic feet. That's just not true now. I think I tell people now, if you've got room for a fridge, a bit, an American refrigerator, the double doors, you've got room for a mainframe. Now, granted, the kind of the energy efficiency is going to be different from a fridge to a mainframe, and the use case is very different. I'm not saying take out your fridge. You don't need to keep your chicken and your tomatoes cool. You can just replace it with a mainframe. But what I mean is that they've a current mainframe weighs a few hundred kilograms, like I think 300-400 kilograms, depending on how many racks you have. I'd say it's close to the size of a refrigerator. If you have, it's hard for a company to say we don't have room for that. This is not a kind of beastly large device. It's not space intensive anymore. And we've got Moore's law to thank for that. The fact that technology has kind of gotten more and more powerful, or we can maximize the same amount of power into a smaller amount of space. This is an increasingly agile industry. A phone now has more power than the original
Right.
mainframe, and the original mainframe, like we just said, is thousands of kilograms. But yeah, I think that's also a very outdated mentality. Easy for me to say. I'm very new to this industry, and but I think it does an injustice to what the mainframe is, especially the actual powerhouse that is the Z16. What it can do versus what people kind of think it can do is, and again, for the size, fantastic piece of hardware.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree with this point. And now, like, I would like to talk a bit about your experience as a STEM ambassador or civilian instructor at your RAFAC Squadron, right?
Yeah,
So,
the RAF cadets. Yeah.
okay. So, as a STEM ambassador and civilian instructor at your local RAFAC Squadron, how do you inspire and educate others in this field? And could you please also tell us a bit about the RAFAC Squadron? Like, what is it all about?
Yeah. So basically, you have like kind of your Boy Scouts. They exist still in the UK. I know they're quite famous in potentially in the UK and America. And you still have other groups like the Girl Guides or kind of Girl Scouts or something like that. The RAF Cadets is one of the three I guess technically 4 if you include the CCF, but you've got 3 kind of military youth groups. So you've got Army Cadets, Sea Cadets, or Navy Cadets, and then Air Cadets or Royal Air Force Air Cadets. You also have the CCF, which is generally meant for like schools, maybe like a boarding school, so the combined cadet force. So they get to do a bit of all 3, a bit of kind of field craft, a bit of outdoor kind of orienteering, and then they do stuff like flying, and they'll also do stuff like boats. But generally, yeah, you've got different squadrons for each of the different cadet corps and cadet kind of groups, as I say, for the Air, Navy, and Army. Now I used to be an Air Cadet, and as I say, that was actually one of the ways that I got my kind of my help doing work experience in the Royal Air Force. And I kind of felt like I had so much of a good time. I had so much that I learnt and developed. I wanted to give back to my Air Cadet Squadron. So when I left Airbus and I moved back to my hometown, I started volunteering at this same squadron. Now I'm not very good at fieldcraft. I don't generally wear camo. I actually do the opposite. I wear something floral and vibrant. So I'm not hiding in any nature. I'm not hiding in a bush, and I'm not gonna do anything like that. And there's certain things that I'm not qualified to fly. I'm not I don't know how to fly a glider. I mean, generally I can run a flight sim, but it's a bit different in real life. So I sort of said, what value can I provide? And because of my work at Airbus and because of my understanding of aviation and general engineering principles, I wanted to teach STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I guess I try to inspire people by saying like, look, I'm not military, I'm not a millionaire, I'm not going to be one of these people who you kind of want to be as such. I'm going to be one of the people who helps you become your best self. So I don't want someone thinking I want to be like Niall. I want them to think I want to be my best self, and Niall is helping me become that. So I teach and I provide pastoral support. A kind of like a role model character as well. And one of the things that I teach, as I say, in STEM, one of my most favorite topics to cover. It's quite memorable for me because it was the first topic I covered, and I wrote a really fascinating PowerPoint. But it's basically biomimicry, and so I was trying to teach these, this different generation. Because they don't have the same things in common as I do. I'm only 10 years away from them, but we have different insights and perspectives. And I was trying to teach them. So I was talking about things like where do we get designs like that the honeycomb shape, the hexagon, is actually structurally one of the most some of the greatest structural integrity, and that's why we use that. And I was teaching them things like why is it called a camel pack, the brand, because camels store moisture in their hump, and there's all these things that I was learning and myself, and then getting to teach again. And it's fantastic, yeah. And they really loved it. And I taught them about different types of flight, so like different types of wings and fins, and why we base them on different animals like birds or dolphins have fins. And then one of them asked me about dragonflies, and I was teaching them about ornithopters, and that was just before Dune came out. And that was a fantastic bit of timing, because then when all these people watching Dune at the cinemas, they were saying, oh, that's an ornithopter. And I know that because, Niall taught us. So that was a really, really rewarding experience for me. That was my most memorable experience in teaching STEM at my Air Cadet Squadron. Yeah.
Okay. And we also got to know that you are also a qualified suicide first aid trainer and advocate for a mental health. So how do you integrate mental health awareness into your professional life?
I know Reg Harbeck did a really interesting article, like a really interesting point about this on I saw it on LinkedIn, and I've known quite a few of my colleagues have made posts. I know Angie Stevens is an absolutely phenomenal lady, a lovely woman, and she made a post about this and on social media, and I do think it's important that we all kind of acknowledge, just because someone's smiling doesn't mean that they're happy, and just because someone's maybe looks like they've got their acts together doesn't mean they necessarily have. Like, we can always be more understanding, more patient, just in case something's not going the way that we want it to. But it was interesting because I think this question's. I think the difficulty is people think of it that we've got our profession and then we've got mental health, and we have to try and fit mental health in. Whereas mental health is just an aspect of life, right? So
Right.
health is an aspect of life. You know, you don't say how can we fit health into our job. Our job kind of ideally should work around our health. You know, if you are disabled, you know, and you can't get to the office, you shouldn't be expected to do that. You know, you could be allowed to work remotely, or there could be a chairlift, or kind of a, you know, some sort of mobility aid. And I think with mental health, it should be similar. We know we should be understanding that people take time off. You know, that they have stuff going on. Maybe they've lost a loved one. They're you know, struggling with bereavement, or maybe they've just you know, they're struggling in terms of, you know, debt or something, and that's affecting their kind of mental faculties. So I'd like to think of it that, you know, rather than thinking of it as a professional, thinking of it as a human, we all just empathize more. I know to me, the big thing I always try to do is I try not to assume people's mental state. I try not to assume their emotions. You know, someone could smile and it doesn't mean they're okay. So I sort of say, like, are you okay? I try to be patient, you know, and I think it's all about language as well. It's treating everyone with that level of respect and that level of empathy, and saying, look, you know, maybe your performance hasn't been great, or maybe you've done this and this, we expect better of you, but not saying it in a kind of belittling way or a dehumanizing way, saying it in such a way that they know we've got their back and we know that we want them to do better. I've done a lot of work, in kind of suicide first aid more recently, but mental health I've done for years, volunteering in, and I think it's fascinating, especially in male-dominated industries such as, you know, the mainframe kind of IT sectors, and before that, aviation engineering at Airbus. These are male-dominated industries where people struggle a lot with their mental health and don't want to talk about it. And I think sometimes you just have to. Someone has to be the bravest person in the room and start that conversation. You know, actually, you know, in the UK, we have a real problem of how are you doing? Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, all right. Yeah, good, thanks. And then actually, no one says I'm having a really tough time. The honest answer is I'm struggling. And if one person does it and says, you know what, I've had a really rough weekend. You know, I've not been sleeping. I've been struggling because of this. Maybe they don't have to say everything, but they just open up that little. Everyone else around them can open up a bit more. And I know there's a big misconception that, you know, you're weak for opening up. You're kind of weaker for expressing yourself. That's really common with men as well, and obviously, you know, something that I try to challenge. I don't think there is any weakness. I think it's actually weaker to conform to a sort of outdated stereotype that men have to bottle things up. I think that's weaker. I think expressing yourself and emoting is a sign of strength. You know, I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of the fact that, you know, despite how I feel and despite what's going on, I'm here, I'm doing my best, and I'm going to continue to give it, you know, 120%. But I know that is a real problem, as I say, especially for men, that it can seem, you know, like they don't want to emote about something because they'll be judged or kind of thought less of. But I try to challenge that quite a lot.
Okay. And as per your experience, like, what all strategies have you found effective in promoting mental health and well-being in the community?
So with the charities that I volunteered with, so I've done a lot of work with a charity in the UK called Mind, which focuses on mental health. And then there's another charity which I sort of volunteered with, writing blogs, like articles for, which is called The Voices of Hope, and that was actually in New Zealand. Still don't quite understand how I got in touch with them, but that happened. So me, a British person, writing for some New Zealand charity. I mean, you know, life's a bit funny like that. But when I was writing for both of these charities, I think it was trying to make sure that the content was relatable. I think a lot of the time when people kind of write blogs or they, you know, record videos, especially kind of in this era of, you know, influencers, people really want to be seen as like the funniest, smartest, coolest person in the room. And that's funny and cool and inspiring for the people watching, but it also it can make people subconsciously feel inadequate. You know, they've got their act together and I haven't. And similarly, when I did a lot of work with Papyrus, which is a suicide prevention charity. We went to a lot of schools, colleges, for their open days or their freshers fairs, and we went to a lot of Pride events, so Birmingham Pride, Bromsgrove Pride. And when I was at these events, again, people sort of think, you volunteer for this charity, like you've got your life together, you know what you're doing. And I'd always sort of ground them, and I think that's important. Grounding people and setting that baseline that, just because I volunteer, just because I'm passionate about something, and I'm wearing a t-shirt, I've got this aesthetic going on, doesn't mean that I have my entire life together. I'm still learning, and I teach this to the air cadets all the time, and it's an important lesson for any walk of life. I would say this to mainframers who are starting their careers, or I know Shari, love her to bits. Shari's classifies herself as new to the mainframe.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be young to be new to something, and it's just about setting that baseline that you don't have to have learn everything already. You don't have to be perfect at everything already. There is an opportunity to learn. There is an opportunity to grow. And if you work with the right people, they will support you. They won't diminish you and say, oh, you should know this already. How could you not know this? Or how could you not have already achieved this? Do you know what? Everyone works at different rates. Everyone grows at different speeds. And the important thing is you're growing and you're learning. And yeah, that's the kind of baseline I try to set. It's for me, promoting mental health and well-being starts with you don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have perfect mental health. And same with the mainframe. You don't have to be perfect on the mainframe. You don't have to know everything about COBOL or everything about Rex or Carla or anything. It's just about learn as you go and do your best. And your best should be, to everyone around you, it should be good enough. And if it isn't, ask for help, and the right people will support you. So that's always been my strategy, is sort of just set a healthy baseline. I do know that in some companies there's a culture of work really hard, work really fast. You need to give 120% all the time. Human beings aren't built that way.
Yeah.
We don't have the capacity to overcharge our batteries and then transfer 100% of energy into that role. I think of it as almost like light bulbs. Original light bulbs before LEDs, they were actually emitting, as much as they emitted light, they were actually wasting most of their energy on heat, and the light was a byproduct. So in terms of efficiency, non-LED light bulbs were really inefficient, but they still did the job. No one could say that light bulb doesn't light the room. As long as you're doing your best and you're ticking all the boxes at work, that's great. So setting a healthy baseline. Yeah, sorry, I went on a bit of a rant, but setting a healthy baseline.
Yeah, I'm also agree with this. Like, we all need break. We are not a machine actually, so we need break. We need some strategy. Like, we need to spend some time with family members, and other things are also there. So that's a good thing. And I would say that such type of awareness campaign should be conducted in across the globe, like for all kind of organization. Even nowadays, school, colleges, students are also facing these challenges in their life. So such type of conferences and the things should be conducted all over the world. Fine.
Totally agree.
So yeah, and although we have various topic to discuss, but just because of the limited time, I would like to ask my last question to you.
Sure.
How do you envision the future of this mental health advocacy, and what role do you see yourself playing in it?
Do you know what? This is going to sound really idealistic and possibly naive, and I am, and I think that's a good thing, because we've got enough cynicism and pessimism in the world right now. Enough hassle and stress from the politics and all this. I would like to believe, that in terms of the future of mental health advocacy, there doesn't need to be any. I'd envisage the future role I see playing in it. I don't need to. I would hope, again, fingers crossed, praying for it, but it's not necessarily realistic, is that as a society, as a society kind of worldwide, we accept mental health more. We don't have these unrealistic expectations for people to work, as I say, 120%. We don't demean men and boys for emoting. We don't say kind of grow up, man up. We just say that's actually healthy. That's a really healthy thing to do. And yeah, I just think that with all the right steps being taken, people having a reasonable expectation of, like, as long as you don't take the mick, if you do need stress leave because you've got stuff going on, the rest of your colleagues will work hard to help you, because we know you do it back. And with all these little things added together, these building blocks kind of adding up and up, as a society, like, what, as I say, ideally, there would not need to be advocacy for mental health, because the world would have kind of accepted that it's a real thing. I've always said, and I know this is a really common sort of quote, or really common trope, so forgive me, but people don't have to justify their time off when they've broken a leg. People don't have to justify their time off when they've got appendicitis and they've just had an appendix removed, surgery. Now, granted, surgery is invasive and it can be life-threatening, but bad mental health, letting that go too far and letting it get too bad mental health can be life-threatening. And you shouldn't need to break your leg in order to justify taking time off work if your mental health requires that. In the same way, you shouldn't need to justify it if you're unwell, like if you've got a cold or the flu or COVID. We should just be empathetic and say, do what you need. Your health comes first. And that's a line I say to my colleagues quite a lot. If they need me to cover them, if they need to, I don't know, get some support, I'll always say, I'll do what I can, but just remember your health comes first. And your family's health, as well, comes first. So the short answer is, in an ideal world, there is no need for advocacy on mental health, because as a society, we have accepted and grown and sort of understand mental health better.
Okay. So thank you so much, Niall, for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with us. I hope you also enjoyed this session.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to watch subsequent kind of episodes. Really, it's Reg's episode was fantastic, and I know some of the people you've got in the pipeline, and I can't wait to watch their sort of sessions. So yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.